starting here just in a couple seconds. I believe it's actually live on air right now. So you can go to jeffreydarty.com, christianwhistleblower.com, and see the video and audio simulcast. You can also have access there to the dark room chat room. That's through our mutual broadcast.com headquarters and our webpage, of course. And tonight we're going to talk more about Confessions of an Exorcist. We've got some other things that we also want to talk about tonight. And, of course, included in those is Unindoctrinate Daily. You can always find Unindoctrinate Daily at jeffreydarty.com. You can find Unindoctrinate Daily at jeffreydarty.com, christianwhistleblower.com. And you can find us there. And you can find your Unindoctrinate Daily there, which is basically a collection of news items from across the internet. And we try to put things up there that are interesting. We try to put things up there that are of note to people. And the video is now available on jeffreydarty.com. We just got that completely put together for you. And tonight in the Unindoctrinate Yourself, a couple of interesting items. And I don't put them up there unless they're super interesting. This one is a little bit funny. A Christian prophet, quote unquote, loses his buttocks to a hungry lion while trying to prove that God would save him. This is from Raw Story. Evidently, this Pentecostal prophet got a little carried away over in, I don't know, someplace where they have lions. And he ran out in the middle of a lion safari where they were chomping on an antelope, apparently. And he ran up to them. And the lions took offense to that. He quickly realized his mistake, and he turned around and tried to run away. But as he ran away, one of the lions took a bite out of his butt. So there you go. Don't mess with a hungry lion, especially when he has an antelope. You wouldn't think that you'd have to tell somebody that, but evidently some people are not very fast learners. And you know what? This brings up something in my mind. And here we are. We're nice people. We're standing by. We're just we're promoting the truth that we believe in. We're promoting ideas that we believe in. We're not trying to tell anyone that they can't be a practitioner of Pauline religion. We're not trying to tell anyone that they can't follow the teachings of Paul and big-time religion. But we are very dedicated to telling people that there is a compelling difference, a complete difference between what the original Yeshua movement was about, the original teachings of Yeshua and his apostles, and the current teachings of the Roman Catholic and Roman Protestant churches. And, we keep to ourselves. We try to stay above board, and we try to stay positive, and I certainly do myself. But sometimes you're like this lion. You're just minding your own business. You're just doing your own thing. And some smart aleck wants to come up and be stupid. And, well, every now and then you got to chase a dude and bite him in the buttocks. You just have to do it. And let it be known that if you get too close to the lions, you're going to feel the roar. And as this movement begins to move and grow and gain steam, people would do well to keep those thoughts in mind, because we're not here to be messed with. We're not here to mess with anyone, but we will stand our ground rhetorically when necessary. And there's been a few unfortunate individuals that have found that out the hard way. I never bit anybody's butt, but I have taken a few chunks out of some butts rhetorically, because it's really not hard to do so when you've got the truth on your side, and you've got logic on your side, and you've got science on your side, and you've got biblical research and biblical text on your side, as well as parabiblical text and parabiblical research. And here's another one that I've written a book about this, or this was in a book that I wrote. I believe it's on the website. The book was called Rocket Man: The Crazy Life and Work of L. Ron Hubbard. Yes, it's there. Rocket Man: The Crazy Life and Work of L. Ron Hubbard. It's an ebook, kind of a small one, but very, very interesting. It's not a publication of the Church of Scientology. It's my look at the life of L. Ron Hubbard, and it's actually an objective look. I'm not taking shots. I'm not having any type of a negative opinion or a positive opinion. It's an objective look at what was a crazy life and the work of Mr. L. Ron Hubbard. And the reason that is of note when we're talking about this next story, it says the Devil's Gate, a portal to hell in Pasadena. This is a place called Devil's Gate. Believe it or not, it is just outside of Pasadena, California. And it's a place that there's been well, we should start at the beginning, I guess. L. Ron Hubbard, and why do I always forget the guy's name? The guy, Jack Parsons, that started the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Really, Jack Parsons, the father of NASA. And L. Ron Hubbard, LRH, as we say, was a roommate of Jack Parsons. I mean, that right there is crazy, right? But these two guys lived together. It was a big mansion, so it wasn't, from, and we don't know that it was intimate, and I don't think that it was, but be that as it may, L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons lived together at Parsons' home there in the LA area. They were involved in what you would call thelemic or spiritual workings, things along the lines of Aleister Crowley, which was a good friend to Parsons and at least a friend to Hubbard, even though, of course, Crowley was across the pond, as they say over in England. But Parsons and Hubbard were involved in something called the Babylon working, which was also something that Crowley was involved in. They were trying to bring a spirit, and they did do several things. They brought a mate for Parsons that Hubbard promptly stole, but that's another story. But at any rate, they were trying to bring an entity. They're trying to open a portal is what they were trying to do, long story short. So they went out to this place called Devil's Gate. I guess they felt like both Hubbard and Parsons was probably the brains of the outfit, though Hubbard was one of the early nuclear physicist type people. He wasn't a nuclear physicist, but he did some of the first studies in nuclear physics in the United States, so he wasn't a dummy either. And they figured that this place at Devil's Gate was a place to go to open a portal, so they went out there, and they claimed that they opened a portal and that something came blazing out of the portal, and then the portal closed up. And that was about 6 months before a little occurrence that happened in a little place called Roswell, New Mexico. So did Parsons and Hubbard open up a portal that allowed the Roswell craft to enter in? And from that time to this, there's been a rash of suicides at the Devil's Gate. It's actually a dam as well. There's been a rash of paranormal sightings of demons, sightings of devils, sighting of all manner of creatures. Several people have gone missing there, and several people have committed suicide in that area. And these things were not known to happen, at least with the frequency that they do now, before Jack and L. Ron went out there and did whatever they did. So Devil's Gate, a portal to hell in Pasadena. Whether it's a portal to hell or not, I don't know. Whether it's even a portal or not, I don't know. But when you've got guys like Parsons and guys like Hubbard saying it happened, and you've got all these type of activities following it up, interesting stuff, to say the least. So that's Unindoctrinate Daily for you. And tonight we now turn our attention to the Confessions of an Exorcist. And of course, a week from tonight, I'll be on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. I'll be on for the whole show with George. And we will be talking about demonology. We'll be talking about exorcism. And we will be talking not only about occurrences and stories, which are interesting enough, but I'm going to introduce some new understandings about the very nature of demons, the very nature of exorcism. And I believe it's information that has not been heard for over 2,000 years. I believe we're going to bring forth information that was taught and practiced by Yeshua and his disciples, but it's been long forgotten, and it's, to be frank with you, long suppressed by the powers that be. So we'll talk about demons, we'll talk about exorcism, we'll talk about the nature of demons, the nature of exorcism, and we'll talk about responsibilities and callings from Yeshua regarding departed spirits and the spirits we cast out. And we're even going to see amazing work from Sir Isaac Newton on dealing with what you now call demons, but you won't after you listen to that broadcast. And of course, last night we talked about the dirty birds and Hitler's nest. We talked about the hotel that I spent 1 week a year at for 3 years. That was also a hangout back in the day of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi hierarchy. We talked about seeing apparitions of the classic black-clad Nazis. We talked about hearing the voice of Hitler himself calling his dog Blondie, although at that time, to be frank with you, we didn't have any idea who Blondie was. We just knew the voice sounded strangely familiar, and we, as a little bit of research, turns up that, of course, Hitler's dog's name was Blondie. So it was Hitler calling his dog. And then we also saw what was it, the energetic residue of Goebbels and his occult practices that were taking place, or was it a glimpse into a rift in time? I'm betwixt and between on it. I'm beginning to think that maybe this is less layers of spirituality that as it is layers of time, and all time may be running concurrent, and we may be seeing, when we think we're seeing ghosts, we may just be seeing into another part of time. But there are indeed some that get caught in time. So all of this stuff and much, much more tonight on the Christian Whistleblower Show here on the Mutual Broadcast Network. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, your Christian whistleblower, and we'll be right back after these messages, and we'll dive deep into Confessions of an Exorcist. Okay, we're on a break on the radio side, a short break. Most of these are very short. And we go out to some 40 stations across the United States. So that is a priority at this point. So just sit back and relax as I mute myself over here. And we'll be right back in a few seconds with more of tonight's program. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. And you can, if you look to the right there, type questions into that chat box, and I'll be more than happy to respond to you. Well, hello, folks. We're back. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian whistleblower, and we're here on our last broadcast of the week. We'll be back, of course, on Monday with more. And just another reminder, a week from tonight, I'll be on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie for the full show, talking about some of the same things that we're talking about here tonight. And, wondering about are the things that we're seeing, are they glimpses into time more than they are latent energetic manifestations? I also, these are just questions going through my mind. Does altitude affect time and space in spiritual terms? So much to study, so much to learn. And of course, the biggest thing is to never stop asking questions. So leaving Germany and leaving my time in the Air Force and leaving behind the stories of Mr. Hitler and his denizens, I finished my enlistment in the Air Force, and I returned home, and I was still very young, but I was a guy that was probably wise beyond my years, at least experientially. I mean, by the time, I'm barely, I guess, 30. And I've been around the world, been on 5 continents, preached in 5 continents, been places that Hitler was, been behind the Iron Curtain. Just a lot of breadth of experience, a lot of paranormal experience of wide variety, and probably far beyond my years. Unfortunately, I was too big of a dummy to really take advantage of most of it because I was so programmed into the Pauline Roman mind matrix. And I came home and just about immediately went into Christian ministry. And with that in mind, it's really not that much of a surprise that with that background and with that diversity and with the things I'd seen and with the things I had done, I almost immediately started to see the cracks in the foundation of what I call a big time religion. I think I just simply had too much real world experience to be able to exist very long, very happily within the narrow minds of religiosity. I'd just seen too much, I knew too much, and I didn't, however, know it all, as I was very soon to discover. And one of the most shocking revelations for me was to learn that demons go to church too. That's right, folks. Demons go to church quite often, in fact. Demons go to church, and demons go to church quite often. And more shocking, at least to me at that time, was finding that these demons were quite comfortable and at home in church. In my mind, and I'm sure maybe in your mind as well, if you think about demons being in church, you would think that they'd be shrieking in pain. You would think that they'd be, smoking or about to burst, into flames from the mighty power resident within the house of the Lord. And to tell you the truth, that simply was not the case. In fact, in now 35 years of exorcism, 35 years of evangelism, I have yet to see a single demon uncomfortable in a church. Every single demon I've seen in church, and there's been many, have all been very comfortable there. Think of that. And in fact, on many occasions and in several locations, I've discovered that the demons are welcome guests. Now, remember, I was an evangelist, and that afforded me a rather unique perspective, because an evangelist goes and visits churches constantly, doesn't stay in any one church like a pastor. You go for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time. And I preach in churches all across the country. And remember, all across the globe. I've literally preached on 5 continents, and there's only 7. So having preached on 5 continents, and I've flown over the other one, the only one that I haven't gone to is and I always get Arctic, I guess it's the Antarctic, the one down on the southern part of the earth. But at any rate, I've been in a lot of churches, and I've seen a lot of strange things. And I remember I was in this one church in Eastern Oregon, I was in the midst of a 2-week revival when I got the surprise, at least up to that time, the surprise of my life. Up until that time, I'm sitting there preaching, right? And I'm doing my best. I'm doing my preacher thing. And all of a sudden I see this strange, grotesque creature walk in to the sanctuary. The church probably wasn't really huge. It was maybe 50 feet deep and about 60 feet wide. It was a little off, oblong, rectangular. I was up at the front, and over here I see this creature walk in to the sanctuary. And of course, I immediately looked around to see, like, hey, do you see this? And everybody was kind of like in a freeze frame. Everybody else in the service was in a freeze frame. Time had stopped, which is interesting. And I didn't even think about this. I didn't even put 2 and 2 together, because we just talked about, is it possible that spirituality, we're thinking about the realm of demons, the realm of humans, and we always think about these layers of levels of existence, our layer, the astral layer, the etheric layer. We think of it as layers like on a cake. But this spirit, we'll call him a demon, he came in and time stopped. So was I phased into his time? Did he phase into our time and stop time? Because time was stopped, literally. And this hair is driving me crazy. Time was stopped, literally. I hope that didn't make too much noise. But time was stopped, literally. And he and I were the only ones consciously aware of what was transpiring. So here's me in my suit, preaching. Demon walks in the door to the church. Time stops, and he's looking at me. I'm looking at him. He's looking me over. He's leering. He's obviously quite pleased at my shock and distress. And he actually just kind of casually walked into the sanctuary. It was kind of meandering. This was one of those churches that has chairs, not pews. And he's just kind of wandering amongst the crowd, looking at people and stuff. And he was classic Hollywood demon. He was about 6 feet tall. He was green. He was scaly. He had the body of like a lizard man, I would say, and the head of some kind of like a horned frog, nightmarish kind of thing. He definitely wasn't the dapper dresser devil from the potted meat cans of my youth. And, there sat this demon walking through the sanctuary, and I'm watching him, still dumbstruck. And the people are, in a freeze frame, like the end of a end shot of a 70s television show. And then after just a few seconds of that, my initial shock and fear kind of gave way to anger, because, hey, he's messing up my meeting. This guy's messing up my meeting. And in exasperation, I yell out to him, in the name of Jesus, be gone. You can't be here. And what happened next was the beginning of another great lesson about things, quote unquote, demonic, because he flickered for a moment. And I mean, he flickered for like that long. He flickered just for an instant. And then he was back in full force. And he had, it looked to me like 7 others with him. So I had cast him out in the name of Jesus. He left and came back almost instantaneously, and he had 7 more of his type with him. And they were all laughing hysterically. I mean, they were just cracking up. And I had no idea what they're laughing about. And I actually yelled out at him. I said, "What's so funny?" And I remember it like it was yesterday. He looked at me. He's bent over laughing, right? And he puts up his finger like this, puts up his hand with one finger lifted, like, give me a second. I'm dying over here. They're just having a belly laugh. There's one demon that was, kind of the lead demon. He literally is bent over, cracking up. He's got his finger held up just 1 second, and it's a clawed hand. He's bent over. He's having a belly laugh. His friends are finding it even all the more hilarious, and clearly they were really enjoying this. And when he caught his breath, when he was finally able to stand up straight again, he told me something, and what he told me changed my life, and what he told me was a revelation. I've often wondered, and we'll get into this a little bit, why did he give me this revelation? We'll be right back to talk about this amazing story. We're discussing Confessions of an Exorcist, and this is Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, coming to you on the Mutual Broadcast Network, and we will be right back after this. Another little radio break here, folks. We'll be back to finish. Actually, will be our third of 4 segments, so we have another segment to go. We'll be right back to talk more about this demon. And, man, this is some crazy stuff. And this is some of the crazy stuff we'll be talking about, of course, on Coast to Coast. When I'm on Coast to Coast here in a few days. So, for some reason, my hair is just absolutely driving me nuts today. And that is a very short trip, let me tell you. So we'll be right back. Let me rest the voice a little bit before we go back on the air on the Mutual Broadcast Network. And here we go. Thank you, Veronica. I am Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, and we are here talking about Confessions of an Exorcist. We just talked about the first time that I saw a demon in church, and I cast him out. He flickered for a moment. He brought back 7 more like himself. I yelled out, "What are you guys doing? What's going on here?" They're cracking up. He's telling me, "Hold on a second, I'm dying over here. You're cracking me up." And finally, when he caught his breath and he stood up straight again, he addressed me, and I remember it was a strangely melodious voice. I expected, rah, blah, 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 devil stuff. And he just, his voice was very melodious, but he still had that chuckle in his voice. He was trying to keep from cracking up. And he said, I think he called me boy, if I remember correctly. He said, "Boy, you can cast me out all day long if you want, and I'll be right back just like that." And he snapped his fingers, which had these big, long claws on them, so I'm not really sure how he was able to snap them. But at any rate, and then he kind of inclined his head towards his other demons while he snapped those fingers. And he said, "Just like that, I'll be back, and with reinforcements." And he was, pointing to his dudes, and his dudes were just kind of standing there and, kind of following his lead. And then he went over, walked up, right past me, not close enough for me to touch. And he went and sat down next to the pastor, which was over here, off behind me and off to my left. And he actually sat down in the seat that I was sitting in before I had got up to preach. And he leaned back and he put his arm around the pastor. And I'll never forget this. Then he actually laid his head on the pastor's shoulder. And it was disgusting. It was just amazing to see that happen. And he says to me, you see, laying his head on the pastor's shoulder, and the pastor's frozen right in time. And he says to me, he invited me long before he invited you. And his buddies, which are still in the back of the church, start cracking up. He doesn't crack up. He's just looking at me. So this demon has walked into my service, stopped time, laughed at me, brought a bunch of buddies. They're laughing at me. Now he's got his head laying on the shoulder of the pastor. And he's just told me that the pastor invited him, the demon, to the church long before he invited me. Then he lifted his head up again, and he kind of sat up straight in the chair, and he said to me, he said, we're both guests here under his authority, pointed at the pastor. We can both stay until he tells us to leave, the demon said. Think about that. The demon told me that the pastor had invited him, same pastor that invited me, and we both were there and able to stay as long as the pastor desired for us to be there and desired for us to stay. Then the demon stood up and he stretched and yawned, like it was really boring him. And then he flashed me this look of, oh yeah, I got you. This look of triumph, this look of this snarling look of superiority. This like, ha ha, I got you, brother. You don't even know what's going on. And he gave me this look. And it bothers me still to this day because he was getting under my skin and he knew it. That rat bastard demon. And there was nothing I could do about it because I was a young pup preacher. Here was this demon, and he was handing my you-know-what to me. And then he gave another one of those yawns and stretches. I'd let him see me sweat. And he kind of strolls casually back towards the door. He gives an inclination to his buddies. They walked out the door before him. And before he left that sanctuary, he turned back and he looked at me and he said, I know you don't believe me now. And then he said it sing-songy, but you will. And it was so creepy. I know you don't believe me now, he said, but you will. And after that, he turned and he walked out of the church, but not before he gave me a wink with that crazy reptilian eye. And I didn't know what to think. And all of a sudden, time snaps back again. And of course, I'm still standing there with a microphone in my hand, my mouth probably hanging down on the microphone. And I guess, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds go by. And I notice that these people are awake again and they're just staring at me. And I'm stunned. I mean, here I was in a church. This demon was obviously in charge. So I stammered back into my sermon. I finished it. I fled, got out of the building. I was too, shaken to really say anything to anybody. And I just kept the story to myself for a while. I ended up not even telling the lady I was married to at that point in time. And the experience taught me a really good lesson. And this is a lesson that you would do well to learn and remember. We tend to think, because religion has taught us to think this way, we tend to believe because religion has so jammed it into our minds, we tend to think of church buildings as holy ground, quote unquote. And we tend to think and believe that church buildings are off limits or safety zones against dark forces. Nothing can be farther from the truth. I've seen it in reality in the spiritual realm, and I don't really need to go into the nefarious activities that are being perpetrated in Roman Catholic churches, do I? Do I need to go into the nefarious activities that are being perpetrated in Protestant churches and pastors' offices between pastors and secretaries and pastors and female members and male members. Do we really need to go into that? That's happening in the house of the Lord. There is no such thing as sacred ground in a building constructed with stone, wood, anything. They are just buildings. They are not holy places. They are not sacred ground. They are not off limits to dark forces. They are not safety zones. There's no such thing as a no-fly zone in the spiritual world. Church buildings are just that, buildings. It's not the sign above the door that determines the sacredness of any structure. It's the activities that take place behind that door, and we'll do well to remember this. Now, I'm a big fan of science fiction, and I know science fiction and horror movies tell us that, holy ground is, churches and places like that, but what they tell us as holy ground is nothing more than a clever plot device when it comes to church buildings. Now, that being said, I do believe, and I have been in some places where there did seem to be some type of a sacredness to the ground, a sacredness to the grounds. Very rarely in a Pauline church, but sometimes in some sacred places of Native Americans I have seen that have held some, it seemed to me, innate sacredness. But there really is, you should never bank on something being holy ground, quote unquote. You should never bank on something being off limits, quote unquote. And as a footnote to the story, 2 days later, I found out what the demon was talking about. That pastor that the demon said had invited him in, the guy's dead now. If he wasn't dead, I would call his name and expose him, but he's dead, and there's no need to talk about him after he's dead, make his wife or whoever has survived him feel bad. But 2 days later, I found out what that demon meant when he said that. I didn't believe him now, but you will. He was right. I became a believer when that pastor that invited me, when that pastor that had also invited the demon, cornered my wife, not my wife now, I'm not married now, but my wife then, cornered her in the kitchen after service and groped her breasts. And as she related the story to me through, her tearful eyes, I knew exactly what the demon had meant. Now, did that pastor knowingly, officially say, "Hey, Mr. Demon, come into my church," or was the demon welcome to the church due to some type of nefarious activities or openings in the pastor's lifestyle? I think that when he's grabbing my wife's boobs in the church, that you probably know the answer to that question. But to me, very interesting is that the demon was willing to share a little truth with me. He was even willing to give me some prophecy, if you will. And I think as I look back over it and as I inventory my feelings at the time, I think the demon might have been making a little overture to me. I'm convinced that he was kind of offering me some sort of a partnership where he would feed me information about the future and the hidden lives of people around me in exchange for who knows what. And this answers a lot of questions for me because I've met some preachers in my time. I've met some spiritual workers in my time too that seem to have remarkable power, and the remarkable power that they possess is out of all proportion to the spirituality of their lifestyle. I have seen preachers that have remarkable power and gifts in spite of what I know are staggeringly flawed personal lives. And we can all probably think of a few spiritual people and spiritual leaders that fit into that category. And I'm convinced that there are a number of preachers, a number of priests, and a number of gurus that draw their powers and abilities from alliances with dark beings such as the one that offered me the deal. And there's a lot of new age frauds that think they have this nice little deal with what they call a spirit guide, and they're really just prostituting themselves to this spirit guide, and then they're prostituting you to them, and they really don't have any power. They just have this hookup with this being that's using them. And it reminded me of the words of Yeshua in Matthew chapter 7, literally rendered. He says, people will say to me, did we not foretell the future in your name? And in your name we banished devils. Did we not in your name manufacture many marvelous works? And then Yeshua said, I will tell them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you that perform such deeds by power acquired from those of iniquity. Depart from me, you that perform such deeds by power acquired from those of iniquity. And I say that tonight to you, and you know who you are. Depart from me. Get away from me. Don't hang around me. Don't email me. Don't call me. Don't show up on my door. Don't write me. Don't ask me for help. Depart from me, you that perform such deeds with power acquired by those that work iniquity. Get out of here. Leave me alone. You know who you are. I know who you are. And if you don't have the wisdom to get away from me, you may find yourself like that poor fellow that walked up to the lion and ended up running away with a half a butt. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. We'll be right back with our last segment after this. Was that a threat? And I really didn't have anybody particular in mind with that. I think that's just something where, you know, my spirit knew, my blink knew that there's somebody out there trying to do that to me. So I was just speaking what I heard in my spirit. So I don't have anybody particularly in mind. I haven't had any disagreements with anyone lately. So don't think that I'm aiming at you. If I was aiming at you, I would tell you who you are. But we'll be right back. Of course, we're on a radio break again, and we'll be right back with our final segment. And in that final segment, we're going to be talking about how sometimes these demons can be attached to places and not just people. So we'll talk about sometimes it comes to pass, sometimes it comes to stay when we get right back on the Mutual Broadcast Network. And we are back for our final segment of the week, the final segment of the week of the Christian Whistleblower Show. And I'll remind you that on Sunday, we're going to be doing the NCK Center, the first broadcast of the NCK Center at noon on Sunday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. So you want to be, pardon me, together. You want to be with us for that. And that'll be done just exactly like we're doing the video and audio on the website. So the NCK Center coming up on Sunday, and we're into our last segment. And I want to talk now about some things that I learned along the way. And I spent the majority of my time in big time religion doing the work of an evangelist, preaching from church to church, speaking at special events and meetings. I did, however, pastor two churches along the way. And the first one was in the beautiful city of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. If you've never been there, very beautiful place. But at that time, at least, it was a good thing to learn about demonic stuff, because the city and the area surrounding it was, again, at that time, I can't speak for it now. This is where that guy that just got shot in the back, that guy that had introduced Ted Cruz. And man, there's a story. If you stuff about to break on Ted Cruz saying he is the anointed one, and Ted Cruz believing in dominion theology, folks, if you don't want a Christian theocracy, you better take a second look at Ted Cruz. Scary, scary stuff. But at any rate, at that time, Coeur d'Alene was a hotbed of dark magic and dark energies. In fact, Coeur d'Alene is less than 7 miles away from what was the home compound of the Aryan Nations, a white supremacist group in Hayden Lake, Idaho. And when we were there, I mean, there were thousands of people at that compound. I think it's shut down now, but at that time, they were going strong. And my family and I, we lived in the basement of the church building. We never saw any paranormal activity down there. But upstairs in the sanctuary, that was a different story. And on one of the first Sundays that we were there, I was preaching. And this was, I think, before the East Oregon thing with the demon. I think it was. And we were there, and I was preaching my sermon, and I saw 4 great big dirty pigs. I mean, big old pigs run down the middle aisle of the sanctuary, circle around the pews, and run out again. And, you know, they acted like it was their place to be. And like that East Oregon experience before, or I think this might have been first, the timeline is a little bit fuzzy to me, but just like the experience in East Oregon, time again stops while I watched those silly pigs run around my church. And I remember as they ran out, you know, time clicks back on again. Everybody is looking at me like, what's wrong with you? And I was looking, and I was amazed that there weren't muddy footprints and mud on the floor, because I totally expected there to be, because these pigs were muddy, they were dirty, and they were making noise, and they were running, and mud was flying, and there was no mud. I mean, how cool would that have been if there actually had been mud? But there was no mud. And as I prayed about it, thought about it, dissected it, the reality is that they were obviously a spiritual manifestation of some sort, and it was an unclean or unbalanced manifestation, in my opinion. And they had either been allowed in or had come in via some attachment during one of the prior pastoral administrations, you know, much like the demon that was at the church in Eastern Oregon coming in, because that pastor had allowed him to come in either by invitation, which I doubt, but it is possible, or he had allowed him to come in by having, you know, obviously a messed up personal life that created openings for channeling, if you will, or allowing the spirits to get into his church and to reside there. And that very night, after I saw the pigs, I prayed over the entire building, anointed with oil all of the entrances and the exits, and I never saw the pigs again. So I manifested my authority as pastor, and the pigs went wee all the way home. And I never saw those pigs again. But it's interesting, and this will probably be our last story for the night and for the week. And this is a classic one. As interesting as the pigs in the parlor were, they were nothing compared to what happened on our first Halloween there in Coeur d'Alene. And you have to understand what was going on at that church. When we first got there in February, there was 11 people in the first service. That included myself, my then wife, my son Joshua, and our baby daughter Charity at that time, who now has 3 kids of her own, which is kind of interesting. But there were 4 of us plus 7 of them, so there was 11 people that first service. And to make matters worse, this building held like 300 people and had these real nice wooden pews, but there were 11 people spread out across a sanctuary that would hold 300. I used to say that I had a problem with the Wood family because all I would see are these wood pews. But by Halloween, October, obviously, our regular attendance was about 100. So we'd done it. We'd done a good work, and it was, people that had never been to church. So it was very satisfying. And I learned to rope off the sanctuary, so I herded people together. And that's an interesting analogy for a guy in that's really trying to bring sheep together. But our regular attendance was about 100, and then an idea came to me that ended up being brilliant. I took out a half-page ad in our local newspaper, black background, white letters. Give Satan a trick and your soul a treat. Halloween full gospel revival. It was a gutsy move, especially considering, the level of dark spiritual activity in there. And man, it worked like a charm, pardon the pun. When Halloween night arrived, the church was packed. There was about 300 people. It was packed full. Special music, special singers. Everything was awesome. I got up on the platform to start preaching, and it sounded like I'd, walked into Yankee Stadium. I'm used to, maybe 100 people. And all of a sudden, there's 3 times that amount. And they're all excited. And man, it was just awesome. Everybody was loving it, except this one dude off to my right. I noticed him immediately when I stepped to the platform. I thought he was a Catholic priest because he was in all black, and I thought I saw the Catholic collar thing, but no, he was just in a black suit with a black shirt buttoned up like you would put a tie on, but he didn't have a tie on. So he was up there, and I was preaching, believe it or not. Knowing me now, my sermon was, there's power in the blood. That's how messed up I was. And he had this huge book in his hands, a huge Bible, like those huge family Bibles. Or if you've never seen those, the big Bible at the front of a church, or that great big dictionary that's on the pedestal at the library, if any of you remember what a library is. But I was preaching there's power in the blood. And as I started preaching, I noticed that the guy in the dark clothes, every time I said the blood, he would get real antsy and real agitated. So, of course, I started saying it more and more. And the more I'd say the blood, he would just, it was almost like it was epileptic or something. It was like it was, causing him pain. And the more that I said the blood, the more agitated he would get. So, of course, in true go big or go home fashion, I jump off the platform. It's only about 2.5 feet, but hitting a wooden floor, it made a nice dramatic sound. And I walk over to the guy, and the people in the front pew parted and the people in the second pew parted. He was in the third. And I put my knee on that first pew and leaned over right as close as I could to his face. Said, "You don't like that blood, do you?" And as soon as I said that, boom, he was up on his feet and he's leaning over towards me. So we're almost face to face, and he surprised me with that. And he picked up his big old book, and he was about ready to bash me over the head with it. And right behind him, I see Sister Lovey. Now, Sister Lovey was about 70 then. She was every bit of 4 feet tall, and she didn't weigh 100 pounds soaking wet with a brick around her waist, And she's rebuking him for all she's worth. In the name of Jesus. And Sister Lovey was going to town. She was my ultimate prayer warrior, my ultimate supporter. I love that woman. I mean, she was that little, but she was 10 feet tall and bulletproof in the spirit. And we're going to have to wait until Monday to finish that story. We're out of time. I didn't mean to do that, but that's a pretty effective cliffhanger. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian whistleblower, and we'll see you next week. And until then, unindoctrinate yourself. Okay, for those of you that are watching the video, I'll go ahead and finish the story for you. And he had that book up, and he's about ready to bash me in the head with it. And I looked at him, and I just said, "Jesus." And he froze, like those people in the church before. He froze, and it was like he was trying to hit me, but he couldn't hit me. He was doing all he could to hit me, but he could not hit me. He was frozen by my intention using the name of Jesus. Of course, it wasn't anything of the power to do with the name of Jesus. We'll talk about that. It was just the power of my intention. But he's standing there trying to hit me with this book, and he's frozen. He can't. And so I walked around, I put the microphone down, I walked around to his pew, and I took him by the arm, and I led him out of the church. And, I asked him, do you want to be free of this? And he said, no. And so I got him to the door of the church, and in typical, Christian fashion, I said to him, okay, I throw you out to Satan that your soul might be saved, because that's the Christian thing to do. And then I walked back into the sanctuary, and I picked up that microphone, got back up on the stage, walked all the way down to the one end, because it was long. It's probably 40 feet. I walked all the way down to the one end, looking at everybody, walked all the way back to this end, looking at everybody. Then I had that microphone in my hand, and I just did the classic preacher thing. That's the kind of power I'm talking about. And the place just exploded. And I mean, it was just, and wow, there you go. So it was a very interesting Halloween night. We'll be back on Monday with more of the Christian Whistleblower Show, and be back here on Sunday at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, for the first, I guess you call it a service, the first meeting of the NCK Center. That's our virtual fellowship for folks that are fed up with religion. So I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. We'll see you on Sunday for the first service of the NCK Center, and we'll also see you on Monday. And again, until then, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, encouraging you to unindoctrinate yourself. Take care, folks.